Welcome to the Weird Around Illinois podcast. Today we're going to talk about not necessarily a cryptid, but something more supernatural. We're going to be talking about shadow people. Now, for the longest time, I thought shadow people were ghosts. I thought, the strange shadow that shows up in the film in the haunted house, that's a ghost. But further research and watching more shows and reading more books has taught me that that's not necessarily the case. There is an entirely different thing out there called a shadow person. And these things are really creepy, and they show up in the strangest places, and they don't seem camera shy because there are tons of films out there with pictures of these things.
Now, what's pretty creepy about this is that when I was younger, I had an encounter many times, more than just 10. I'm sure that's been over 20 times in the same place, in the same house. I've seen a shadow person. It was a clear humanoid body, and I'm not going to go into any more detail, but I've talked about it in Winter Stories, and now just hearing about it now, that it's not a spirit and it's almost always evil, that's kind of terrifying. What could have happened?
Yeah, I mean that's the thing about shadow people. It seems universal. Anytime you see a shadow person, it's bad news because it's not like a spirit where they could be good, they could be evil, they could be neutral. It seems like shadow people are always evil, at least in every story that I've ever heard about them.
Does it maybe make your luck go away? Maybe you're more unlucky?
I'm not sure, honestly. I'm gonna have to do my own research after this podcast, to be honest, to find out more on what those shadow people can really do.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I've never heard specifically what they do to people that makes them evil. I've just always heard, whenever a paranormal researcher sees a shadow person, they're always, okay, we got to get out of here. There's a shadow person here.
Yeah.
Now, as to what shadow people are exactly, I mean, apparently they're not spirits. I still think maybe they could be. There are a lot of people who believe that there is another dimension that these things are coming from, like a shadow dimension, and that if you're seeing one in the same spot over and over again, it probably means there is or was a portal in that location, and they were just creeping through that portal.
Well, oh boy.
Yeah, that portal's probably still there. Unless the portal was in an object, which is no longer in that space.
Yeah, because we said this in the other podcast, around when I was 10, it just kind of disappeared, and I forgot about it.
Mm-hmm. There were a couple things that changed in that area around that time, so I'm thinking maybe whatever the portal was got moved or moved out.
And I've personally never seen it in that area. I used to be an early bird. I used to get up when it was sunrise. I would never see it.
Yeah, and I was up till all hours of the night, and I never saw it. I will be honest, if I ever had to go into that area when the lights were off, I always felt creeped out, even before I heard those stories. So, maybe I felt something there and didn't realize it. Maybe it just went through that adult filter that I'm always talking about, where, you feel something and it's like, oh, that can't be real because it's not logical.
Yeah, this was when I was a child and, didn't really have too much of a filter.
Right. And I think that's why you saw it more clearly or saw it when the rest of us didn't.
Most likely.
There's a lot more research to be done in this area. There are sightings of shadow people at different locations in Illinois, but they don't seem as long-standing as spirits. Like if a ghost haunts a place, it's like you can come back to that place 20 years later and the ghost is still there, whereas shadow people seem to be a bit more fleeting. Well, thank you all for listening, and thank you all for subscribing. And as you can tell by this podcast, we are eager to learn more about shadow people. We are far from experts on this subject, so if you have some information to share, please do so.